Welcome to another episode of our personal empowerment audio program, Finding Yourself in Paradise. Hi, I'm Michael Benner.
And I'm Steve Snyder, and our program today is on one of my greatest passions. We're going to talk about what school could be, what I've called for many, many years the gentle overthrow of the school system. Getting rid of this outdated, outmoded, antiquated method of schooling our kids and replacing with real, true 21st century education.
I think most people have asked about their schooling would start out, at least, talking pretty negatively about their experience of it. Most people don't like school. And yet, if you pause for a second, probably wouldn't take too long to remember some really good times. Not just with the kids you went to school with, but really good teachers. I bet you had a few that really made subjects interesting. Times when you felt like it was really fun to learn. And when you on the way to school or on the way home were thinking, I really like this part of school. I love to learn. This is really fun. Well, today Steve and I are going to talk about why it's not like that all the time and what kinds of changes need to happen in order for us to all have that experience most of the time.
Let's start with a basic overview of the evolution of the educational experience of the human creature, because it's evolved over the hundreds of thousands of years that we've been here. I mean, it started off when we were nomadic, that we would basically, the boys would follow the men and the girls would follow the women, the older women, and learn how to do what they did. It was watching them and imitating and doing what they did. And then we moved into an agrarian society, and we had a chance to start putting kids together in one-room schoolhouses. We had groups of kids learning all kinds of different ages with one school marm or one teacher who's working with all these different kids. And then as the Industrial Revolution came, we moved into this current situation we have now where all the kids of the same age are in the same room doing the same things in the same way at the same time. So they all graduate at the same age with the same database, using the same tools, working at the same speed. I mean, this whole homogenizing education, the idea of zip open brain, stuff in fact, zip it back up and vomit on Friday thing that was created to create factory workers. The whole concept of our current school system was to get people who can follow instructions, obey directions, and do what they're told. Well, that was a valuable skill when we worked in the factories, but times have changed. School has not.
And it's going to have to. In fact, part of the challenge to educators, to teachers and managers, administrators, and academicians studying this whole field is that we're training people for jobs that don't exist using technology that hasn't yet been invented. Now think about that. Didn't have that problem in the past. In fact, it's been less than 100 years that you had to argue with Farmer Jones to get him to even send his kids to school because he didn't see any rhyme nor reason for it. He could have those kids out there in his 40 acres with a mule getting some work done. He needs them on the farm, especially the women. Hasn't really been that long since society has been allowing, at large, women to seek university education, higher education. And not only for jobs or careers, but just for personal fulfillment, to be able to pursue a passion and interest, to develop expertise in and of itself can be fulfilling. I think that's part of the women's liberation movement, so-called, that was never really understood by a lot of people. Ultimately, it was about freedom, yet for many it was economic necessity. But what we need to look at as we look at education and the challenge of the future is, what's the point of educating? What are we training our people to do? As Steve said, maybe in the 19th century and before it made sense to teach all children the same thing in the same way at the same time. You're filling factories with workers, but now, as we move into the 21st century, it's increasingly clear what people are going to be paid for is their individuality, their creativity, not their brawn or their strong back, but how intelligent they are, what their particular skills are, how quickly they can learn, how quickly they can adapt, that is, unlearn and relearn. For many of today's students are going to end up with 2, 3, 4 careers in their lifetime. I think that 30 years and out with a gold watch is pretty much yesterday.
Yeah, the world has changed and education has not kept up. I mean, the human factor in education is essential. I mean, if you go back to the earliest days, then it was oral tradition. There was no books. You had to pass the word along. You had to have a live teacher talking to live students and get them to learn it, to memorize it, so they can pass it on to their kids. It's not a matter of just learning it. It's really memorizing it so you could pass it on later. And then, of course, Gutenberg came along. The world changed, and now we have books. But if books were enough, you could just pass out all the books to the kids and say, read this stuff, and you wouldn't need human beings. Obviously, that doesn't work. Kids need to be able to interact with human beings, and they need to be presented that material in more than just a written way. Reading a book is not the best way for some kids to learn. Some kids learn better from teachers talking about the information to them. And up until now, we needed to have well-educated people, like we needed a math expert to teach kids arithmetic, but we don't need to do that anymore. I mean, kids don't need the world's experts in the subject matter to teach them. What they need now is great presenters. And the bottom line is we now have the ability to get the world's greatest presenters, people that, they know, arithmetic, they know algebra, they know geometry. Maybe they don't know calculus, but they know much more than these kids in 6th grade know. But what they are is they're brilliant presenters. Not the world's experts in math, but the world's experts in taking a curriculum and presenting it in such a way that kids can get interested. And we can do that. One teacher, the world's best, can work with 100,000, 1 million students. We're no longer limited to the teacher in the classroom presenting the data to the kids. We still need the in-the-classroom people to work with the kids on their individual questions and their unique abilities. But presenting data can be done not by the person in the classroom. They can become now a facilitator, and the world's greatest presenters can present to the kids through the internet.
If we look at what young people love to pay attention to, we're going to get some clues as to how to structure education in the 21st century. Video games, all right? Now, you say that the first thing the mind does is go to the extreme. Hold on, don't go too far. You don't have to turn schools into a video arcade, but we can learn from the principle of getting better and better and better, and then on to the next level. There's no social advancement in video games. You don't get to move ahead just because you're the same age as everybody else in the group. You've got to pass a test. And if you miss a few, you don't accept the grade and move forward. You look at the few you missed and learn those, and only then do you go on to the next level.
It's important to understand the way the brain is geared is much, much more toward visual things and movement than it is to sitting still and listening. The listening part of the brain is tiny compared to the vision part and the movement part. Vision and movement are much more essential to our survival than is sitting still and listening. So presenting information in a didactic manner where one teacher gets up there and talks is not the best anymore. We can do far, far better than that. I've had this vision all of my life, well, I won't say all of my life, but for much of my life, of the concept of a mind lab, a interactive multimedia accelerated learning device where a kid sits in this mind lab and they put their fingers in biofeedback ports that measure galvanic skin response as well as heart rate variability and lets them know when they're in this alpha state, when they're focused and in this passionate state, and then presents the information in really visual and powerful ways to them with great educators and great graphics and great visuals and all the stuff they're used to get their attention, to keep their attention, to hold their attention, and present the information to them in that way. And the Mind Lab learns how the kid learns, and it speeds up as they're learning faster and slows down as they're learning slower. If they're a visual learner, it gives them more pictures. If they're an auditory learner, more words and sounds. If they're a kinesthetic learner, touch screen stuff, more to touch and handle and do. And for physically active kids that have trouble sitting still, built rollers into the floor so they can run in their chairs and get their spilkas out that way. It's a really, and then the Mind Lab knows how many repetitions a kid needs and what reading speed and comprehension level he's at and pushing them to do a little bit better. It's an amazingly interactive device. And kids can take in information in their Mind Labs for maybe 60 or 90 minutes a day. You don't want to spend all day in these things, but take in information about all the incredible, powerful subjects they need to learn anytime they want to learn them. I mean, you can say, I'm in the mood for history right now, and the Mind Lab can teach you history right now with the greatest presenter of history. Or the Mind Lab might say, well, you're a little too far behind in math. You should catch up in math, and then you can do a little more history. So the bottom line is each kid learns in their own individual way and learns in their own individual style as the Mind Lab adapts to the way that child learns.
We've also got to take a look at what constitutes reward in a system like this. For example, to say that the best you can do in rewarding a kid for performance in school is a letter grade, I think he'd rather have a lollipop or 10 more minutes in recess, or, if it were an executive in a business, he doesn't need a raise. Just give him the preferred parking spot for 30 days.
Yeah, because, sometimes that A has a lot of negative things that go along with it. John Lennon said they hate you if you're clever and they despise a fool. If you get that A or if you get that D, you're looked at as sort of weird. You want to get the B's and C's like everybody else does.
I remember a friend of mine had a little brother. We were probably 9 or 10 years old at the time, and the little brother was like 5 years old. And we were standing at the bus stop, and he took great pride in telling me that his little brother could name all the planets of the solar system. Well, he's 5 years old. I doubted that. But the little kid did, and we both praised him. And as I look back on that, I can see, well, that's why he did it, for attention. If you give a kid a little bit of attention, give them something warm and human besides a letter grade or some sort of quantification of how they did, that's fine and necessary. We got to keep our stats and do our tracking, but we need to have this emotional element. So, yeah, it's high tech, but it's also high touch as well.
Yeah, the reason babies learn to do things is because when they do things and they get that smile from their mother, that gleam in the mom and dad's eye, they want that again, and they do that again. And teachers play that same role. When a teacher can give a kid individual approval, that the old Ken Blanchard one-minute manager concept, catch them doing something right and pat them on the back kind of thing. When teachers can give kids one-on-one approval, that's a much more powerful reward than that letter grade. The intrinsic value is a much more rewarding experience than being called something or given something outside of yourself. So what we need to do is teach kids to learn the way they learn best, not try and get them all to learn the same way. One of the breakdowns, for example, in our school system is the way we teach kids to read in the first place. There's basically these two different ways that have been competing with each other all these decades. One of them is sort of a auditory way, a sounded out phonics way, and one of them is a visual way, a look at the word, flashcard kind of thing, memorize what the letters look like and the words look like. And they've been debating back and forth, which is right, which is wrong, which is best, which is worst. The bottom line is they're both the best for the kinds of kids that learn that way. Like auditory learners would do better with auditory techniques, and visual learners would do better with visual techniques. Trying to teach all the kids the same technique that only works for some of the kids. And of course, the kinesthetic kids fall out either way. They need to learn by, maybe building blocks or drawing the letters and touching them and holding and having a visceral experience with the alphabet to get really to what that means. So we need to start understanding one size does not fit all. We need to create a school system. Actually, we need to get rid of our school system and replace it with an education system that varies to each individual child, that teaches visual kids in a visual way, auditory kids in an auditory way, and kinesthetic kids in a kinesthetic way, at the speed that they work best at. The bottom line is, we want them to go fast. We just don't want them to hurry. That's a great John Wooden quote. We want them to push themselves to learn the stuff and to really get it. But not to get just through it, but to really get it. As Michael was pointing out, if there's a piece of information, a chapter a kid's supposed to learn, and there's a test on it, and there's 10 questions on the test, if they get 7 of them right, they don't move on to the next lesson. They have to take another test with the 3 they got wrong, and then prove they learned that stuff just as they do in their video games before they move on. So, of course, it's going to change the nature of the way school works, because some kids are going to graduate at 15 and others are going to graduate at 19, but that doesn't really matter anymore. There's no stigma attached to graduating at a certain age. Some kids finish their education after high school, some after 2 years of college, 4 years of college, 12 years of college. Our education goes on as long as we want it to.
And if we're going to continue to quantify this, we don't have to make a big deal out of it, but let's say we still are tracking students with numbers and statistics. It seems like some element of that is always going to have to be in there. Well, in addition to the so-called letter grade or the percentage indicator compared to other students, don't we need a second indication of performance that has less to do with what is known at the time of the test than it has to do with the rate of learning that has taken place between the last 2 or 3 tests? Maybe we're making a mistake if we think of ourselves as a container of information. Maybe we should start thinking of ourselves as the creative minds and passionate hearts that process that information.
And that's a big part of what education is, not just taking in data. There's got to be the processing of that data. So if a kid spends a quarter of the day, say, in a mind lab, in this interactive multimedia accelerated learning device with 3 different keyboards, a musical synthesizer keyboard, a mathematics keyboard, and a speed writing keyboard, kind of like a court reporter keyboard, so kids can take notes at hundreds of words a minute instead of a dozen or two. You know, it's always been amazing to me that we still use that old keyboard that was designed to be as slow and awkward as possible so the metal keys wouldn't stick together.
The QWERTY keyboard.
Yeah, we really can do a whole lot better than that. So the bottom line is kids spend a quarter of the day taking in information at their own pace as the mind lab adjusts to them, and then they spend another quarter of the day processing it. That is, spending time with the other kids, both older and younger, who are interested and learned about the subject. Just like the old one-room schoolhouse, there's some good aspects to that, where the older kids tutor the younger kids in the subject matter, and the younger kids and the older kids play together, interacting with the educator and the other adults in the room. Now, this is a place where I think education can fundamentally change, because I think we could have, for example, one educator for every 100 kids, and somebody with a doctorate degree in child development or child psychology, and we can pay them like $200,000 or $300,000 a year. You know, get really brilliant, qualified people to be the in-room educator, and by virtue of that doctorate, they could have dozens of interns working under them for supervised hours. Don't have to pay them anything, but part of their master's degree to become educators is they work and volunteer as educators. And then, of course, we can have the parents come into the classroom for a day out of the month, maybe. And I've always thought the great mix is to bring our incredibly underused resource, our senior citizens, into the classroom and let them interact with the kids. And now you got one adult for every 3 or 4 kids in the classroom, with one master educator who's coordinating the whole thing. And the kids are in small groups and individually working together about studying the things that they've learned, and they're preparing themselves for the exams that they're going to have, or the play they're going to do, or the story they're going to write, or whatever it is they're doing. So a quarter of the day in the mind lab and a quarter of the day with the other kids, older and younger, and all the adults discussing and working together with what they learned in the mind lab. Now, I think it's really essential that also the kids spend some time, maybe a quarter of the day, working on what they're great at, their talent, their gift, their ability, their specialness, their uniqueness, because, see, that's what education needs to be. Education, from the word educare, means to draw forth, to bring out of, to cause to grow. And what we want to bring forth, what we want to cause to grow, are talents, our gifts, our abilities, our special things about kids. And we can spend significant time with these children who, for example, have a talent for art, putting them together with other kids who have a talent for art, and parents who have a passion for art, and getting them to really develop whatever art it is they're into, whatever music, whatever creative expression is, whatever it is that they have that just they love. It's not a coincidence that they love it. It's because they have a talent for it. So a quarter of the day spent developing this gift, talent, or ability, and then finally a fourth quarter of the day, in any particular order, working with the other kids in games and play and sports and stuff, with the emphasis being on teamwork and communication and esprit de corps and stuff. Winning and losing becomes more significant maybe when they get older, but with little kids, it's not really important. It's working against sportsmanship kind of stuff. And then I always add a really essential piece that needs to be part of the process is getting out of the cities and into the woods, into nature, handling this nature deficit disorder that our kids are having, and getting them out into the, put your feet in the ground, feel the stars above your head, and really spend some time understanding the world from that perspective as well.
I also think there should be much more community service in schools to bridge the academic world into the, quote, real world. Clearly, you're bringing together two needs in a way that benefit both ends. And so to work in the community, in a kitchen that feeds hungry people, or a clinic for people that have no health insurance, or to help promote job fairs, or larger charities like Salvation Army or B'nai B'rith or the Red Cross or the YMCA. All of the rich experiences, then, that these students are going to get doing this community service, everything that they learn out there and the real world that they face, is going to increase the likelihood that their lessons back in the classroom or at home with the textbook is going to come alive and connect in a very real way.
And if the purpose of school or education is for kids to learn stuff, to get stuff in their head, then we need to do it the way that works. I mean, right now, it's so clear that it's failing. I mean, half of the kids are dropping out of school, and those that don't forget most of the stuff they learned in school very shortly thereafter. The purpose is to learn stuff and know stuff. We're failing miserably, but fortunately, it doesn't really matter, because if we sort of remember it, we can Google it and find it out again. If we're interested, we can go look it up. It's not like we need the teacher to stand in front of the room and tell us stuff, because that's the only way we can get that stuff. We can get that stuff other ways if we're interested in it now. What we really need is school to evolve into what it could be, which is preparing us for life. And preparing us for life is not filling our heads with facts. Preparing us for life is helping us understand about ourselves, about our relationships, about our country and our world, helping us understand about how to live with each other in harmony in this world, and help us understand how we are not only part of this world community, but a unique, one-of-a-kind part of this world community, and help us understand how we fit in, what our specialness is. What I think the most important thing our school system can do is help kids discover something that's wonderful and great about them, and help them develop that, because greatness at any endeavor spills over into every endeavor.
About themselves.
About themselves. Something that only because of their unique gifts, talents, and abilities they can do as well as anybody can do, and they love to do it. And that's always been the key. You know, it doesn't serve us anymore to teach our kids to attempt to be jack of all trades, because there's too many trades. There's like learning history now is a lifetime endeavor if you really want to become an expert at it. You have to spend decades, 20,000 hours or more to really become an expert at something. So you can't do that with a whole bunch of different things. What we need to do is expose kids to all the good stuff and find out where their talents and their gifts and their passions lie, and then help them become great at something instead of trying to become great at everything.
Great point. And I think this takes us right into the whole idea of what in business is called motivation. And yet, whether in business or in school, isn't it really interest? I mean, trying to motivate somebody to be interested in something that they're not interested in certainly has some value. For example, there are going to be those I don't mean the elective, but what were the general college courses that you had to take, especially your first 2 years of a four-year degree, even if you didn't want to take them? We have that in grade school also. If there's going to be areas where we honor that a kid is naturally interested because they have a natural gift, a talent, a tendency, a curiosity, then there are going to be other areas where they don't have that. That just makes perfect sense. So how do you motivate? Better said, how do you help someone, a child, a student of any age, become interested in what they're not interested in? Well, I think for the older student, you can put it to them that way. What is interesting in this? Well, I don't know. Nothing interests me. Well, somebody wrote the book, and it's possible to get a university degree and even an advanced degree in this particular topic that you're not interested in. What do you think they might be interested in? Well, I know you don't know, but take a guess, if you could know, and lead a discussion that just might pull the curtain back a little bit, far enough for the student to be interested in it. And again, if a teacher just lectures, that's not likely to happen. But if they take the opportunity to engender these discussions, and the best teachers always do this is nothing new, but I'm just saying, we've got Google, we've got the computers. The teachers don't have to pour the information in so much as inspire us with their leadership to be curious.
So the role of teacher goes away as replaced by role of educator/facilitator. The person in front of the classroom no longer has to be an expert specialist in subject matter. They now have to be an expert specialist in children. And that's the shift that has to take place. And, of course, as long as we have a teachers' union, that's not going to happen in the public school system, but it is starting to happen in private schools and in charter schools and in other international schools around the world. We're starting to understand that subject matter is not as important as children. Now, not that we're the first to understand that. Maria Montessori talked about that a very, very long time ago. This is not brand new information. But we are starting to understand that, especially because of the fact that we have the internet and we have the information available to us at our fingertips, what becomes essential is to understand how we learn it. How to learn is much more critical now in terms of our educational process than what to learn. There's too much to learn at all, and we can learn anything we want. What matters is how do we become better and better at doing that, at learning. And that's really the secret. See, what we need need to do, and we've been talking about this for a long time, is we need to take school out of the beta state and put it into the alpha state. Take school out of this experience of boredom punctuated by moments of high anxiety and put it into a state of fascination. That's the shift that has to take place. School, mostly for most kids, is hours and hours of boredom punctuated by moments of abject terror when they take the test. And both of those are wrong. They study in boredom, they try and test in anxiety. It's just way off. What we need to do is mesmerize these children, hypnotize these children by the way television does, the way their video games do, the way the movie theater does. We have the technology to put them into this incredible focused passion alpha brainwave state, and in that state bring out of them their gifts, talents, and abilities, and let them explore all the data that they're interested in and that we need them to understand. You see, I'm not saying it's not in our best interests for every kid to know math. I mean, basic arithmetic and algebra even, I agree. But to force a child to attempt to learn something they're not interested in is a waste of everybody's time. If you want a kid to be interested in math, what you do is find out what they are interested in, like sports, for example, and teach them math through sports. Teach them earned run averages and batting averages. Teach them how to figure out how to do the things they want to do. You want them to do in a way that they want to do it. Or, as was said so many years ago in such a wonderful way, a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. You know, we can find a way to make all of these facts that we think it's important our children learn so not only palatable but enticing. We have the technology to market it in such a way that kids are hungry to learn this stuff. I mean, you can sell anything if you market it right, and that's what we need to do. We need to get kids to be begging, like, Mommy, please, can I have a math class? We know how to do that. We get kids to do that for their toys every single Christmas. We know how to do that. We need to use that technology in our educational system.
Imagine going to school and the bell rings and you sit down in your first class, whether it's grade school, middle school, high school, university, and the teacher, the instructor, the facilitator says, "So what do you guys want to do today?" At any age. Now, obviously, there has to be some structure. The teacher knows what's been done in the past and has a lesson plan, knows what they plan to accomplish in the future, but the responsibility, seemingly, is being put on the student, who now feels empowered and free to decide. Maybe they don't want to do anything. Well, come on, it doesn't take that much enticement, that much guidance to get them to be excited about something. And an object in motion tends to stay in motion. Well, a brain that's engaged and a heart that's having a good time tends to stay in motion too.
And you know, a lot of what our teachers, I blame none of this on school teachers. This is a systemic problem. This is a school system problem, not a teacher problem. But a lot of the problem is that they're one teacher in front of a room full of 30, 40, 50 kids, and they have to discipline as well as teach. That is, when two kids start misbehaving, throwing things at each other or arguing with each other or hitting each other or whatever, they have to stop the teaching process and put their attention on the kids, which disrupts the learning process for all the rest of the kids in the room.
Which really rewards the kid that's acting out.
Because they're doing it to get attention, and boy, do they get that attention.
Right.
And the thing is, they hate being in that classroom, so they get sent out of the classroom to the VP's office. You know, they get exactly what they want. It's really stupid.
Don't throw me in that briar patch.
That's right. I've been involved in a group called Super Camp for a lot of years now. They do these summer programs that are incredible, and you know, they have more than one adult in the classroom. And when you have a bunch of adults in the classroom and two kids start acting out, one of those adults just goes and stands right behind those two kids that are acting out, and they shut up. The teacher doesn't have to miss a beat. If you got a few extra adults to go around, that stuff goes away, and all that problem of stopping and starting and stopping and starting goes away simply by having some help in the classroom, by having some interns and by having some parents and having some senior citizens come in and do some assistance. So we can change the whole process. And as you said, it can become much more Socratic, much more asking questions and getting dialogues going and getting things much more, and small groups of kids and large groups of kids. And it can be fun. It can be really an enjoyable process because what they're learning about is the most fascinating subject in the world, which is really themselves. And they understand more and more about themselves. They understand more and more how to be successful in the world. And we teach them things like how to balance a checkbook. And we teach them things like what it means to understand how it feels to live in other cultures and other countries in the world. And we teach them things that help them not only cope, but excel in the world. And most important of all, as I've always said, we teach them how to learn. I mean, what a waste of time having kids reading at 200 words a minute when they can be reading at 500 or 800 words a minute. What a waste of time having kids go over the material 7, 8, 9 times, rereading, because they don't have a specific method of studying, of how to intake, process, and output that information. What a waste of time having kids spend all that time studying and learning this stuff and then freezing on the test and not remembering it anyway. And what a waste of time so much of school is, because it's not done in an elegant way. We don't teach kids how to learn, and we just hope they figure it out. And some do. Some do. Some kids will, when you ask them about their experience in school, they'll say, man, it was a breeze. I had the best time. Yeah, some kids, but not most of them. And for those that it was hard for, it was really, really hard.
Yeah, the dropout rate is outrageous right now at a time when a high school education is an imperative, and really a college education has become imperative now, and financially out of the reach of so many people.
And that dropout rate is also propelled by really smart kids who are bored out of their minds, as well as kids who learn differently and don't get it.
Another concept that has to be addressed in the 21st century is the basic inherent dignity of every student. There has to be a no bad student policy in the school. What do we mean by that? We mean that there's a difference between who a person is and the dignity that they should be granted just for being a human being, and how they behave, the way they think, and the way they feel. Too often, our dignity is denied us because of our behavior, and we adopt an identity of other people, and even more tragically, for ourselves, an identity based on how we behave. For example, a parent that says continually to a child when they behave badly that you're a bad little boy or a bad little girl has to begin to recognize at some point that the child takes that literally. That it's not that I behaved bad. Fortunately, I'm loved, and my parents are going to cut me some slack. It's just my behavior that's bad. No, they take it literally. You said you are a bad little boy, a bad little girl. They take it literally. Same thing happens in school. You're in the third reading group. To a student in the first grade, the fact they're in the third reading group, even though maybe it was called the red, blue, and green group, like it took you one day to figure out who was who, right? That becomes an identity for the child, who then carries that perhaps for the rest of their lives, and don't aspire to this dream or to that dream because they were told, or it was implied, or they just inferred as a result of this kind of orthodox structure that they were in the third group. They just weren't college material. So we can be honest about how a kid behaves and their level of performance. We don't have to give every single kid a trophy, right? Much has been made of that. We can be realistic about percentages and the grades, the letter grades we talked about before, but at the same time, we can make sure that we develop a basic sense of dignity from teacher to student, from student to teacher, between the students, that says we're all safe here, we're all learning, some of us are better in these areas, some of us are better in these areas, but this is a room where everybody merits respect from each other, and of course that helps to build the self-respect that's necessary to be successful in the world.
So that's a real result that we can create, creating each kid having that sense of dignity, that sense of self-worth, using our educational process to nurture that. It can be done. And let me just sort of give you a vision of how I see that happening. Propel ourselves a few years into the future, and this is a day in the life of what an educational experience could be. So let's say we have a little 11-year-old girl named Christine, and she walks in the morning into her school, into her education process room, and there's about 100 kids in that room of all different ages. So some are 11, some are 8, some are 14, and 100 kids, one master educator, and about 30 or 40 other adults of various different ages. Some are parents, some are interns, some are senior citizens, lots of people approximately 150 people all together, no more than that. That makes a nice sized group mingling around together. Now, of course, they can break down into much smaller groups and larger groups and all that stuff. But Christine's first process today is in the mind lab. So she sits down in basically her little computer room, her little computer lab. It could be just her and her laptop sitting out on the porch, it could be whatever it is. But she plugs in her earbuds and she's all by herself, there's nobody else interacting, just her, and she puts her fingers in the biofeedback port, measuring her galvanic skin response and her heart rate variability. And if she's a little stressed, what happens is this classical, wonderful music comes in her headphones, and beautiful sky or nature scenes appear on her, peaceful place scenes appear on her screen, and she relaxes, and the machine measures that she relaxes. And when she's ready, what appears on the screen is her avatar, her choice of teacher. I mean, this character she's created, a hero from life or a fictional character, some avatar she creates, who is her guide, her teacher. The teacher takes her through this process. And the avatar says to her, well, on math you're at level 13, and on history you're on level 11, so maybe you're interested in doing some history right now. No, I'm in the mood for math. Okay, we'll do a little math right now. Well, we left off, you were at this, and this place, so we're going to pick up right there. And then the screen goes dark for a moment, and her music and headphones come on with a peaceful place again, and she gets quiet, and she prepares herself for her math lesson. And then somebody who is really good at math, but more important, is really great at presenting math, some teacher is going to give her a lesson in maybe it's factoring binomials, whatever it is. You're going to give her, and it's going to be exciting, and it's going to be presented with comedy and humor. It's going to be presented with lots of surprises and lots of breaks in attention, and it's not going to tax her attention span. It's going to be done in a way that makes her really interested and really fascinated in this particular process. And then going to give her an opportunity to show that she's learned this stuff, or how much of this stuff she's learned, and what she hasn't learned, it'll repeat until she has learned it, and she'll walk away having learned that lesson. And maybe there's time now for another lesson, but maybe it's time to move on to another part of the day. So she says goodbye to her avatar, and she moves on to a part of the day where she's with a whole bunch of other kids talking about this math lesson. And she gets to spend some time working with kids who are younger than her, teaching them easier lessons that she's already learned. And she gets to spend some time working with kids that are older than her, who are helping her to understand the lesson that she just did learn, kind of like the best parts of the one-room schoolhouse. And she really enjoys the process of being both the teacher and the learner. Because, in the real world, in our neighborhoods, we love to hang out kids a little bit older than us because we look up to them. We love to have kids a little bit younger than us hang around because they look up to us. It's much more natural than only being with kids exactly your age. So we spend some time in working with lots of adults in this time period too, who are experts in these subjects as well, who've had their own life experiences and who all know more about math than I do as the kid. So a quarter of the day working with the other kids, developing the lessons they learned in their mind lab. And then I think Christine's favorite part of the day, if I was Christine, is getting to spend a quarter of the day doing what I love. And say for Christine, it's playing the flute. She just from the time she first picked one up, she just fell in love with the flute. And so she's got this thing with this other cello player who has had the same life experience. First time he ever picked up a cello, we loved it. And they're just doing this duet thing. And they're just learning their instruments, having fun, playing with each other, writing songs, having a great time. And she's really enjoying the lessons she learns. There just happens to be a neighbor who is a great flautist who's in the room, giving some lessons and teaching her. Or, of course, she has the opportunity to work with the world's greatest flute teachers on the internet, learning to be better and better at this thing she has this great natural talent for. And, of course, learning that greatness in flute can spill over into whole other areas because, for example, learning music increases our ability to learn foreign language. It increases our ability to learn higher mathematics. It's the same part of the brain. So really, really good stuff. And then finally, the last part of the day, she's involved with a soccer team, or something, playing soccer with her friends. And she's one of the better players and really enjoys that part of the day too. And looking forward to coming up next week, they're going to go to Yosemite for a field trip. School could be just the most wonderful experience kids could ever possibly have. And we could do it for a heck of a lot less money than we're currently spending on our current school system. This whole brick and mortar thing can change. This whole one teacher for every 20 kids can change. We could have one teacher for every 200 kids if we had lots and lots of helpers, lots of parents and senior citizens and interns helping a lot. We can change the whole structure of this thing so that it teaches kids the things they need to learn, how to learn, the values they're going to need, and the basic life skills they're going to need to employ, as well as educating them on what's unique what's special, what's gifted about them. Because, as I've always liked to say, every child is gifted, even though some of them have never opened their packages.
Wow. So Steve's painted a picture for us of an average day in the school of the 21st century. And finally, mental rehearsal. You know, as we record this program, the Winter Olympics in Vancouver are just wrapping up. And I paid attention, especially this year, Steve, to listen how often the word visualization is used or mental imagery. And it's become commonplace with these sports announcers to point out the concentration exercise, the breathing, the relaxation, the focus of intention and attention. It's like they take it for granted when they talk about sports. But, of course, as soon as the Olympics are over and we're off to another topic, the newsmen, the talk show commentators, your movers and shakers and opinion makers, whoever talks about visualization or guided imagery. To learn to do this in the classroom, this is a passion that Steve and I shared all of our lives, and largely what marks our shared interest in all of these related fields is it always comes back to this accelerated state, an amenability, a suggestibility, a receptivity, a remarkable openness to new information learned, not only acquired, but internalized and really understood and adapted and applied in an accelerated fashion as a result of these altered states, this simple level of mind, the alpha brainwave levels, what the brain researchers and scientists call it. It's an empirical place, about 10 cycles per second, but kids don't need to know that part. They just need to know when it's good to be a multitasker and have lots of thoughts in your head competing for attention, and when it's good to slow it all down and use imagery and visualization and even imagination to accelerate the learning process.
Yeah, there's so much opportunity to create such dramatic change. For example, bringing the parents into the process could be so huge. Parents, for example, any parent out there who's had more than one child, and of course Bill Cosby had the line, you're not really a parent if you've only had one kid, because if you've only had one kid, you always know who did it. Those parents who've had more than one child know their learning styles are different. I mean, dramatically different. And if you could, as a parent, go to the educator and say, this is the way this kid learns better, and this is the way this kid learns better, and present the educator with that information, then the kid can continue their learning process in the way that you've identified as the parent is the best way for that kid to learn. And we can have classes for the parents to help them learn how to identify these different ways their children learn. I think one of the most important programs that needs to be taught in our school system and hasn't been up until now is parenting. I mean, you know, we need to teach kids how to have great relationships and how to be great parents. This is more important than teaching them that pi r squared, you know, because every pi I've seen is round. The idea is we need to teach kids, if they're interested in learning about pi and its amazing abilities to solve problems like circumferences of circles, they can learn that. But they don't need to know that. If they want to know it, they can. What they need to know is how to balance their checkbook, how to love other human beings, how to tolerate the differences they see. What they need to learn is values, and they need to learn about themselves. I think we need to have a university that is really more like a Y-O-U-university, a university.
Well, reasons why, these are the motives. It's motive and identity. That's one way to look at it. The reason why, and then the who am I on top of that. How do I fit into all of this, and why should I even care? And again, keep in mind, the accelerating rates of change in society have put us in a place globally where we're training children for jobs that don't yet exist using technology that hasn't even been conceived of yet. How do you do that? You emphasize how to learn. Not this idea that somehow I got in school, that I was getting an education so that I could create a place in my life where everything would be in order, all my ducks would be in a row, and I wouldn't have any significant problems ever again. Right? Wouldn't it be better to train our kids to be better problem solvers, to anticipate problems, to expect them, to see them as a means of learning and honing and improving, finding the opportunity, and what might have been the wrong answer just a few years ago, and everything then works together for good. The game is rigged. That's the kind of attitude that we're going to have in the 21st century.
Yeah, and we don't need everything to happen inside of a classroom. I mean, we've got the internet, we've got all kinds of opportunities to do other things. We could probably eliminate a lot of the bricks and mortar and turn them into parks and recreation facilities. The most important thing to understand is that we need to keep the human element involved in school, and one teacher with 40 kids doesn't touch children. They can spend all day without ever talking to another human being, another adult human being. What we need to do is have a classroom that has like one adult for every 3 or 4 or 5 kids, lots of adults, lots of supervision, lots of opportunity to interact with adults and to learn the values and to learn the most important life skills in that way. We need to get rid of school, this memorizing of facts thing. The facts are out there on the internet. What we need to do is spend time learning how to learn, how to read, study, remember, how to perform under pressure, how to be the best you can be, to take a slogan from the Army. What we need to do is teach kids how to live effectively, how to love quite elegantly, and how to have a kind of impact on other people that is real, wonderful, and positive.
So let's practice what we preach. This lesson, like every other, is best understood in this relaxed state of focused passion. So close your eyes, get in a nice comfortable position. This will only take a few minutes. Sit balanced and centered with your shoulders back, and take 2 or 3, maybe 4 nice, slow, deep breaths, inhaling ideally through your nose if you can, and fill your lungs, hold as you peak, and then take your time. Exhale slowly through the mouth or the nose, all the way out, all the way beyond where you'd normally stop. And continue. Several slow, deep breaths, feeling safer and more relaxed each time you exhale.
And in this quiet place of peace that you create inside your mind, we're going to add a brand new piece. And I think as we do, you'll find that this is real valuable for you. It can make your dreams come true. And what we're going to create is a very special space inside this peaceful place. And this place is a learning lab, a laboratory to learn, a place that you put yourself into anytime you yearn to gain knowledge or process information or remember any fact. This is the place you'll always go. You can always easily come back. So imagine yourself with a mind lab, an interactive device that makes learning lots and lots of fun. It makes it really nice, and it learns how you learn, and it adjusts to you, and the learning lab changes as you do. And it makes it easy to learn. It knows exactly what speed and exactly how many repetitions of the facts that you need, and it knows exactly what you need to know to be able to go easily through whatever lesson you want to do. So imagine yourself with the world's greatest educators there on the screen in your mind. Imagine them, and imagine them teaching you in a way that you find so exciting, so interesting, so fascinating to learn. And you can hardly even get enough. Your heart just wants to yearn for more and more. You want to explore this subject. They make it seem so real, and imagine learning so exciting. Imagine how that would feel. Imagine yourself in this learning lab with this mind lab, and you learning anything brilliantly in a way you're perfect for you.
When you learn a new detail and receive more information about a topic or subject, there's a certain sense of accomplishment that comes with it. And yet when you realize a concept, an overarching principle or golden thread, if you will, that runs through a set of information, you have that little epiphany, that eureka, aha experience. There's a feeling that goes with that that's indescribably wonderful. And the brain and the body, the subconscious and the conscious mind all conspire to recreate that wonderful feeling through letting go. For there is a time to deduce, and there is a time to realize.
So now's the time for all of us to insist upon this change. The old school system just has to go. We have to rearrange our priorities. We must be clear. We can't teach kids anymore through fear of failure, fear of not fitting in, fear of not learning. We have to begin focusing in on positive things and find the brilliant results that brings. We need to change. We need to let go. We need to finally understand that the old way will no longer work for tomorrow. And so we teach kids instead more how to learn than memorizing facts. We teach kids instead about themselves and understanding so they don't feel such a lack. We teach kids to be excited and passionate and thrilled. We teach kids in a way that leaves them chilled. We teach kids the stuff that they need to learn in a way that makes their passion burn. We can do this. We know how. We just need to bring that to the kids somehow. So imagine a world where kids have learned about each other and themselves, and minds have turned to creativity and problem solving and feeling fulfilled. Imagine a world where people are thrilled to learn. Violence-free, living in harmony. Imagine. Imagine. And it all begins with the children. It all begins with the kids. That's the result that we can create. If in the future we can say we did what we needed to do. We need to change school and let the educational process come through.
Say to yourself silently and internally, I love to learn. And now say it again, silently and internally, as if you really mean it. Put a smile on your face as you imagine saying, as if out loud, I love to learn. I really do, because now you're remembering sometimes that you loved learning. There were a few, and so now you can say honestly, I love to learn. Inhale, big, full breath. I love to learn. And as you exhale, open your eyes, wide awake, refreshed and rested, and in love with learning.
I look forward to the day where every child can wake up in the morning looking forward to learning. Oh boy, I get to go to class today. I remember having classes like that. I think I had 3 great teachers in my life. Fortunately, 2 of them I had twice. So I had 5 experiences with great educators. And I still, I was, 13, 15 years old, but I still to this day smile and remember the lessons that I learned from those people. One of them turned me on to Bob Dylan. I'll be forever grateful for that.
Wow. Well, thanks for listening. I hope you'll use the Send One to a Friend gadget to get this program and others like it to people you know who are looking for this information. It's all at focusedpassion.com. Remember the ED. It's the W's.focusedpassion.com. You'll have a built-in player there. Your programs will always be there. If you had a, God forbid, computer crash or maybe you loaned your iPod to somebody, you can always log on at any time from any place, and all your programs will be in that built-in player. And right underneath it, Send One to a Friend. Won't cost anything extra. You're paying the full boat, 99 cents a week. So there's a reason we don't copyright these programs. We want you to share them. This information needs to get out, so put it out there. And thanks for being a supporter at focusedpassion.com. As always, be gentle, love life, and take care of each other. For Steve Snyder, this is Michael Benner. Aloha from Maui.